At first this video was just going to be about Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 remake and also RE7 and kind of what I like and dislike about them, which I'm going to do, but I want to talk about my opinion on the series as a whole. This video is going to cover the games I played as of writing this, but then I also want to make 1 or 2 more videos on the rest of the games, probably 2. I think it'll be interesting since I'm a newbie to Resident Evil and the first games I played were the new ones. So maybe you'll enjoy my perspective or just think I'm a fake Resident Evil fan since I started with the non-tank controls, non-fixed camera games. So I've known about Resident Evil passively probably throughout my whole life. I remember my cousins playing it when I was younger, but I was always too scared to watch. When most Resident Evil games were coming out, I was pretty young, and even when I started getting older I never really heard anything or had interest in the series. I think I played a demo for Revelations on my 3DS 9 or 8 years ago, but that's it. That is until last year in January 2020 when I bought the Resident Evil 2 remake on the PlayStation Store because it was on sale. When it came out in 2019 I was intrigued by it but never got around to it, mainly because I wasn't playing a lot of games that year. It was my senior year in high school, and looking back I didn't have much going on because high school is a joke in retrospect, but anyways, I just never got around to it. And after playing it for the first time and playing it again recently, it just reassured my opinion. Probably one of my favorite games ever, but more on that later. Half a year, a lockdown, some uncertain and spooky times later, I got a PS5. If you didn't know, on the PS5 there's about 25 games you can download if you have PS Plus. I downloaded a few games I was interested in like Bloodborne, Persona, Crash, and Resident Evil 7. I downloaded it because I heard good things from it when it came out, but I loved the Resident Evil 2 remake, and right after I beat Miles Morales and dicked around with a few other games, then I played Resident Evil 7 and beat it in like a week. If I wasn't working, hanging out with friends, or doing busy work, I was playing Resident Evil 7. Not trying to get repetitive, but this is also one of my favorite games. So after I beat Resident Evil 7, I wanted more. So I bought Resident Evil 3 Remake during the Black Friday sales. I enjoyed it, but it definitely isn't one of my favorite games. It's safe to say 2020 was a year filled with Resident Evil, which is fitting given COVID and Resident Evil's all about viruses, and yeah, it's kind of... There's a lot of accuracy and coincidences that are going on for sure. But the 3 newest games aren't the only Resident Evil games I've played last year. Well, they're the only Resident Evil games I beat last year. In March or April, around that time, I bought Resident Evil 4 on my PS4. It was on sale. I was in lockdown, I thought whatever. I love RE2 and this is the Resident Evil game after all. I remember around that time Some Call Me Johnny was playing it too, so I was like whatever. But being honest, I didn't get into it. I tried and then I tried again in November when I got my PS5, but the controls and I just wasn't really into it at the time. But before you yell at me, I did play it. It's just going to be in part 2 of this series, so more on that in whenever I upload the next video. Lore and history wise, it's one of my favorite game franchises of all time. It's super interesting, but I think there is a reason I only had interest in playing the newer games at the time. And speaking of those games, I'm actually going to talk about them now. So like I said earlier, Resident Evil 2 is the first game in the series I played. Right out of the gate, I love this game. I don't think there's a lot wrong with it, but before I get into that, I'm just going to do a little story summary. This game begins at a gas station where the first main character, Leon S. Kennedy, meets the second main character, Claire Redfield, who is looking for her brother, Chris. Spoiler time, by the way. After being separated following a car accident, Leon and Claire agree to meet up at the city's police department. Raccoon City is infested with zombie-like creatures after the T-virus infects rats, spreading it to the people. The T-virus is a virus created by Umbrella. It basically decomposes most people's cells, turning them into zombies. After killing all the zombies, the lickers, and running away from Mr. X in the police station and looking around, Leon meets Ada Wong. Ada and Leon find a reporter named Ben, who's locked in a cell, where Leon learns about Umbrella and the G-virus, which Ada is also after. William Birkin is that fucked up creature we meet a few times as both Leon and Claire, who is infected with the G-virus. The G-virus is the scariest thing in Resident Evil, but I'll get to that later. Leon and Ada run into Annette Birkin, William's wife, who doesn't want Ada to get the G-virus. Leon gets shot, Ada gets locked in a furnace thing, Leon wakes up, saves Ada, and hits Birkin with a shipping container, and Leon and Ada take the cable car to the spooky Umbrella lab. Well, all that happened with Leon. Claire is doing her own thing. She meets and saves Sherry Birkin, William Birkin's daughter, from an orphanage and from the police chief Irons, who locked her in, and, well, that piece of shit kind of gets what he deserves. Claire and Sherry run into both Birkin and Mr. X a few times. Birkin is after his daughter. After learning Sherry's infected, Claire finds the cure for Sherry. Leon learns that Ada is actually a mercenary and not FBI. Ada falls off a bridge and dies. Claire and Annette are dealing with Birkin again, who's now this giant monster titan thing. Claire sends Annette to use the cure on Sherry while she beats down on Birkin again. Sherry is cured and Annette is killed. Claire and Sherry head towards a train to escape. Leon is also trying to escape, and before he can catch the train, he runs into Mr. X again, who's even more juiced up. Ada gives him a rocket launcher, but she only tells the camera that she's alive. They kill Birkin for good this time, and yeah, they both survived. This was like a very, very brief story summary of the story, and I don't think me summarizing is like the best way to experience it, so you should just play the game. With that out of the way, let's get into why I love this game and some of the things I don't love about this game. I really like the story in this game. The setting, the atmosphere is great throughout the whole game. It's scary, intense, but also intriguing. The story on its own isn't anything crazy, but what I like the most from the story are the characters and the mystery surrounding it. We find out what's going on as the characters do, pretty much. Leon is great. He's one of my favorite video game characters, at least he is in this game. I find it so funny and super charming that it's his first day being a police officer, and it's also the day Raccoon City went to shit. It's his first and last day on the job. I love it. It's funny, but it's also kind of sad. Leon was a great and charming guy at the start of this game, just going into his first day on the job. And then he goes through hell. Imagine going through what he went through on your first day of work. His quips and lightheartedness definitely have a nice juxtaposition compared to, everything else in the game. Yeah, I like Leon a lot. I prefer his plot. It's basic, but the love elements with Ada and making the way through the mansion, sewer, and all these areas from Leon's perspective, I guess. It's super good, and it's just really goofy and fun, but also horrifying. Claire's great too. She's super likable and like a sweet character. The only reason she gets involved in the story is because she's looking for her brother, which is also kind of sad, and her brother's Chris Redfield. Her story is definitely a bit dark. The police chief, Brian Irons, is super corrupt and just a piece of shit. Like, you do not like this guy, and there's nothing redeeming about him, but you can tell he's corrupt, so yeah, but fuck him. Claire's plot is pretty equal in terms of quality to Leon's plot. You might like it better, but I just kind of like Leon better, so I prefer playing his plot. The side characters in the game are fine. Ada Wong, Annette Birkin, and Sherry Birkin, Irons, they all serve a purpose in the story, and it wouldn't make sense if they weren't in here, I guess, but yeah, I like them. As far as antagonists go, we already have Annette Birkin and Chief Irons, who are like the individual antagonists for the story, for each scenario, but as far as like the person who's the main villain is, that at least I consider the main villain of the game, he's the best. William Birkin. This dude and everything that happened to him is so fucking disturbing, but such, I don't know, a cool idea, I guess. Basically, Birkin created a virus called the G virus, or G, and when given to humans, it benefits them with cells that regenerate whenever getting damaged. Think Deadpool or Wolverine. Birkin was going to sell this to the US military since Umbrella isn't giving him the credit he deserved, but he's shot by a group of soldiers who take the G-Virus from the perceived dead Birkin, which is probably one of my favorite scenes in the game.
Got eyes on the G-Virus. We're going in. Dr. Birkin. You'll come along with us, quietly.
You think I didn't know you were coming? This is my life's work. I'm not handing over anything!
We have our orders, Dr. Birkin. I'll ask you one more time. Hold your fire! What the fuck were you thinking? Our orders were to bring him in alive! We're in, sir. But we had a snafu. Target resisted. We had to take him out. That's correct, sir. Roger that. Just the samples, then. Let's move.
Birkin is so obsessed with G that it practically took over his mind before he injected himself with it, and then he injects himself with it, and it just never stops. The cells regenerate so rapidly that it gains its own consciousness and takes over Birkin. Birkin is pretty much gone from the moment he takes it. This is horrifying and tragic, the scariest thing in the franchise in my opinion. A loving husband and father who's a genius turns into a seemingly endless growth of angry muscle, eyes, bones, and teeth. Imagine this happening in real life to someone who exists. He keeps growing and mutating because we keep on damaging him partially. The only way to defeat him is to eliminate every single cells, or else they're just gonna keep on regenerating. Such a horrifying, tragic, and amazing idea. I can't praise it enough. It's so unique and really makes you think. Obviously there's one thing, an elephant in the room that sucks about Birkin, besides, him killing a bunch of people and kind of starting bad things, but it's gross and I hate it and it's fucked up, but you're supposed to feel this way. He basically tries to impregnate his daughter so it can spread the G virus. yeah, but alright, I'm done talking about Birkin after that, but he's one of the best aspects of this game. This game is super dark in tone. The world, the story, pretty much in every way possible. It's dark, but it's not dark for the sake of just being dark. It fits within the game, and the game wouldn't be as good if it wasn't so dark. But man, this game is beautiful. It's beautiful on the PS4, but playing it on the PS5 is just, wow, this is a fantastic looking game. It's so disgusting at some points, but it's holy shit. They're onto something. Yeah, this game looks good, has great characters and a really interesting story and mysteries, but it's also really fun. It's a third-person shooter, but it makes you not want to shoot. If you ever played a Resident Evil game, you know that ammo is limited and it can be scary sometimes. But I find you always have ammo if you're smart about it and explore everything and everywhere. The exploration in this game is great, especially in the mansion. It's a linear game with linear progression, but it makes it feel non-linear by backtracking and everything, but it's done right, so it's just great. Which I think is perfect because not every game has to be an open world or open-ended, but you don't want to feel like you're just walking in a straight line until you reach the end, so there's a great balance between the two. The police department is definitely my favorite area in the game. It's the best place to explore, spookiest place when going in dark areas of the mansion. Puzzles are really fun, and sometimes you're kind of like, what the hell? And there's some that are throughout the whole police mansion, and it's just, police mansion? Whoa, got ahead of myself a bit. Yeah, this game can be really scary. Mr. X definitely comes to mind because he's a terrifying hunk that can be a bit annoying sometimes because you usually have to stop whatever you're doing when he comes for you, but that's the point of him. He's terrifying. You hear just those fucking footsteps and you're like, oh my god, and then you just see him. And sometimes you could be stuck and it's like, alright, I'm just getting punched to death. Fuck. I guess I'm dead. Besides him, you have the Lickers, which are kind of creepy, but they're not scary. They're just kind of annoying. I find usually if you can walk, and then if you just sprint to the door, you'll be okay, but you just can't be loud because they can't hear, or they can't see, but they can hear. They're dumb as fuck. I hate them, but yeah. And the zombies themselves aren't scary. I mean, they're zombies, but it's when you need to go down a hallway to progress. But you have 3 bullets, you're on red health, the hallway is filled with zombies, that's when the zombies are scary, and that's why this game works so well. And yeah, it's an intense game, but it's fair. The difficulty in this game is nice. I played on standard and died probably a lot, but it was never unfair, except for the shitty boss fight against Birkin Stage 2, or G Stage 2. I spent so much time trying to beat him. I was on red HP when it started, I had no ammo, and he would just swipe me once, and it was every fucking time. There's a few more minor issues that I have with the game. Sometimes the pacing towards the end of each scenario, I can feel just come on, it's dragging a little, but also it's dragging an amazing game, so it's more of this fucking awesome game, so it's not really a bad thing, it's just kind of a nitpick, and that's Resident Evil 2. I love this game. It's very close to being perfect. Play it. I'm just gonna get this one out of the way. I don't really like the Resident Evil 3 remake. Resident Evil 3 takes place a day before and a day after Resident Evil 2 remake. Our story follows Jill Valentine after the events of Resident Evil 1, who has PTSD of some sort. She's trying to expose Umbrella for what they have done, but no one believes her, kind of due to Umbrella corrupting the police, and there's no evidence since it was bombed. Next thing you know, a giant thing in a leather jacket attacks her. After getting chased around, she meets Carlos and the boys. Jill gets infected and Carlos needs to save her. Jill's okay and ends up finding a secret lab, and it's revealed that one of Carlos's boys is bad. And our boy Nemesis just turns into a bloodborne monster and gets killed by the gun Wario used in the subspace emissary. Then Jill and a typical Russian bad guy fight and the city gets boomed. Yeah, that was kind of a dumb plot summary, but I just didn't really care for this game's dumb, plot. That's kind of what it is in my books. There's nothing really special to it, but this game isn't all bad, it's not a bad game. This game looks and plays beautifully, same as the RE2 remake. It's a fun and enjoyable game from a gameplay perspective. It's cool to see more of Raccoon City, and the characters they're pretty good. Jill is like a pretty badass and a fun character to play as, and Carlos is pretty dull, but he's cool and likable, and Tyrell he's a fucking dude, and he's killed, but he's a dude, they're good characters, on the good side and stuff. Tyrell had to have been played by Hannibal, or they use his likeness, right? The final area of the game is cool. It feels the most similar to Resident Evil 2, and trying to, walking around, backtracking through the lab, trying to find the chemicals to make, and seeing new enemies, the exploration, it's pretty good, and the early Nemesis sequences are fun and pretty intense, but they don't happen enough. This game is pretty short, which I kind of liked while I was playing it, because it ended sooner, but I feel like it could have been a lot longer, and from what I've heard, it cut out a few things, which is kind of disappointing, but I didn't have that knowledge, so it was kind of like, oh, this is just a short game. But for a 6-hour game that's a AAA game, that's very short. Granted, you can, if you're fucking genius, you can probably beat Resident Evil 2, Leon's campaign in 4 hours, but to me, it took me around 8 to 9 hours per campaign, but you get 2 of them. This is just one story, and it's kind of pathetic, and that's really all I have good to say about this game. It is a good game, but it just almost has none of the qualities that the RE2 remake has. It isn't really scary, aside from a few intense moments, but it's not even that dark. It's way linear. It's usually just following narrow paths through Raccoon City buildings or the sewer or subway station. It seems like it's trying to be a zombie action game instead of a survival horror. Ammo is plentiful, and same with healing supplies. I don't think there was ever a moment where I was close to running out of ammo. Even though it's trying to be more of an action game, it seems like all the cool action is used only in cutscenes, and it's just kind of lame getting a following up to an amazing remake to have an almost a completely different type of game. The Nemesis boss fights are pretty fun, but it still doesn't feel like it belongs in a Resident Evil game. I get that you need ammo to defeat a boss, or else, you're just kind of stuck, but it takes me out of the immersion a bit when every single car is just filled with explosive rounds, machine gun ammo, and healing stuff. I guess if it could have just been implemented better, and you can really tell it was rushed at points. Also, Nemesis. I get that he's a classic Resident Evil villain, but he isn't scary to me. I just think he looks kind of dumb. It's weird, Mr. X is pretty goofy too, but he's still really intimidating. And Nemesis is just Mr. X, but on fucking steroids, but he looks way less intimidating. And when his restriction coat falls off, he goes on all fours and just makes him even more lame. He could easily been the generic boss in Bloodborne or some other game like that. I don't know, and it's really disappointing. I think that's the best way to describe Resident Evil 3 Remake. On its own, it's a really good looking and fun to play zombie action game, but compared to the game that came out a year before, it's a disappointing game that fails to live up to its predecessor. I've never played Resident Evil Nemesis, what this game is a remake of, but I don't think I ever will, unless I would just want to in the future. Right now, I have no motivation to play it at all. I'm fine with playing this, but this game didn't really do it for me. If you like it, that's all good, but Resident Evil 7 is way more up my alley. Resident Evil 7 has almost nothing to do with the other Resident Evil games. It's set in southern Louisiana and follows a newbie, Ethan Winters. Ethan's wife, Mia, has been missing for 3 years, and out of nowhere, he gets a message from her, and he goes to investigate. I don't really blame him. He arrives at a really gross and old swamp house and runs into Mia, but she's acting weird, and then she acts very scary, then it's just what the fuck is even happening? Then Ethan meets with the best family ever, has a nice meal, and, starts his journey. On face value, this story isn't anything special. It could be summarized as Ethan saving his wife from a batshit insane family who lives in the swamp, but like any other Resident Evil game, there's a lot of storytelling throughout the environment. Throughout the game, you learn more about the Bakers and realize with each encounter that they are not themselves and something bad happened to them. And every time you encounter Jack and Marguerite, they get progressively more monsterly or gross, but you also learn more about their human side. The Baker family, for the most part, was just a normal, good-hearted family. But once Evelyn came into their life, it's when things changed. Once you get further and further into different properties, you'll learn about Evelyn and Mia's work with her. Lucas and Zoe are the outliers of the family. Zoe helps you throughout the game through phones and seems like she's alright, not infected with whatever the family is. Lucas, on the other hand, is fucked. He's always been crazy and he never needed a virus or a little girl to take over his mind. Looking in his room, you can find out the horrific things he's done as a kid, and near the end of the game, you learn that he's been working for the Connections and studying Evelyn and the Mold. The Mold are creations by Evelyn that start off in the spookier low levels of the house, but throughout the game they just appear everywhere, all over the house. They're okay enemies. I don't really care for the design a whole lot, but other than that, they are threatening and aren't, dumb. They're actually kind of smart. Evelyn created the Molded and ruined the lives of the Baker family. It, or she, is a genetically modified human who is now a bioweapon that can eliminate enemies psychologically by taking them over, just like the Bakers. Evelyn was probably my least favorite part of the game. I don't really like the concept of her, and her final form is really lame, but she can be damn creepy. Going into her room was so suspenseful and just straight up terrifying. That's all I really want to talk about the story, because I believe this is story best playing it by yourself. It leads you in different directions all the time and is so mysterious and just super good. Play this game. Just play this game. It's spooky and creepy. Gameplay is nothing extraordinary or anything, but it works great. Instead of fixed camera angles or the over-shoulder third person's perspective, this game is in first person, which I kind of think works better than the other two styles I mentioned. Third person over the shoulder, like in the recent remakes in 4 and 5, is great, and has nothing wrong with it, but there's something about the first person view that works so well in a Resident Evil game. It plays the same as Resident Evil 2 Remake, I find at least. The inventory management is just as prevalent, ammo and healing items are scarce, but it's fair. It's not like Resident Evil 3 Remake. This game will have you running around the house finding items you can use in an earlier area or discovering a room that you don't have an item for, etc. You know what I mean? I don't really have a lot to say about this game other than play it. It's fantastic. It's fun, scary, mysterious, creepy, campy. It's great, and it's filled with sad moments, insane moments, and memorable moments. If you're only going to play one Resident Evil game, I recommend playing this one. I think my biggest issue with the game is that it's so secluded from the rest of the franchise, which isn't a bad thing because, like I said, if this is the one game you're going to play, it's so secluded, you don't need to know anything about the other games. But as a fan of the lore, and spoiler alert, played all the main games, pretty much all the main games, it feels like there's something missing, like that continuity between all the games. Well, at the very end, Chris Redfield shows up, who's Blue Umbrella, so there is connective tissue, but it's not throughout the game and everything, and that it kind of feels a little shoehorned in. And yeah, play this game. If you made it this far, that's dope. This is my first video like this, and I don't think it'll be the best video ever, and I probably sound worse through this because this is my first time doing voiceover for a video like this. But hey man, I just hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it was worth your time. If not, that's cool. But yeah, man, I'll probably do part 2 of this for 4, 5, and 6. I'll do part 2 of this series probably in a month, or maybe a month and a bit. I want to do a couple smaller things. I wasn't planning on it, but I'm going to do a video on Mario 3D World, because I just picked that up, and I think it's worth a little video that probably won't ruin my voice like this one. And I'd like to talk about Sonic Adventure 2 and Pokemon White, and then I'll come back to Resident Evil. Like and subscribe, man. I'd really appreciate it, Cheers.